out of someone who's on.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Community Development and Housing General Government Committee. Those who don't know, I live in Winston-Salem, Edie Adams, Councilwoman of the North Ward, but I'm now also the chair of this committee with the election of fellow council member Gerald Montgomery to the State House. I'd like to welcome everyone. We have 4 general agenda items, and we have 4 consent items as well. Are there any consent items that council or committee, because we only have one for council members to be pulled for review? Am I allowed to do actions with only 2 of us here?
Okay, most of the items will still go ahead to consent, general agenda on Monday.
Okay. Councilmember Larson.
Yes, could I have an explanation of C1, please, by staff?
Okay.
I thought I spotted, doggone it. Nothing else. I'll move approval of C2 through 4.
Okay. And you did the motion. I did it before you. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'll do the motion and you can second. Okay. It has been moved and approved of the balance of the consent agenda. Item C1, please.
C1, ordinance amending City Code Chapter 38 relating to miscellaneous offenses and provisions, Salem Lake Marina and Bowman Gray Stadium.
Mr. Royce.
Yes, ma'am. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm good. Next to ma'am. Next to ma'am. But I'm good. C1.
I'm sorry. I was having trouble understanding what you were.
I was saying, ma'am.
Ixnay on the ham.
Ixnay the ma'am.
Don't call her ma'am. Oh,
Right.
I do apologize, Councilmember.
Thank you.
The C1 is we received several requests, and we actually market the Salem Lake Marina in a lot of publications for weddings and special events of that nature, and didn't have anything in our ordinance to allow for champagne toasts or alcohol to be served there at the Salem Lake Marina. Therefore, we look to amend the ordinance to allow for alcohol to be used there and sold at Salem Lake.
Councilmember Larson.
So how does that relate to Bowman Gray? I'm sorry. I understand the marina and receptions and parties and stuff out there. I'm trying to understand what this is suggesting happens at Bowman Gray now.
Ben can answer that.
Councilmember Larson, it's just a technical change to add Bowman Gray. I mean, we currently, alcohol is sold at Bowman Gray, during racing, and there's also the concessionaire that we have under contract provides bartending services for the university. For events in the Richardson room. So this is just to make sure that the Bowman Gray is included as one of the city facilities.
So does this apply to beer and wine, or does this apply to mixed drinks as well?
I mean, I believe it applies to all alcoholic
all
beverages.
alcohol beverage. And will this also apply then to the State Field House or whatever go inside the buildings now at Bowman Gray?
Yes, sir.
Where previously beer had been not allowed in the chamber rooms or whatever.
There was some confusion. There's another statute that allowed our concessionaire through the city license to provide alcohol at the stadium. That's how the beer is served in the beer garden.
Yes.
But when we were checking through it, because we found out that the university also has catered events, sometimes with our concessionaire, sometimes with but in the field house. We wanted to make sure that this other provision in the code also clearly included Bowman Gray. They're not changing anything they're already doing there. We're just making sure the code is correct.
We're legal now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the state university guidelines regarding alcohol are the same as they've ever been.
Right. That's right.
That none of that changes. So it's a matter of the racing or special events or events at the Salem Lake would now be authorized to have beverages.
Yes, sir.
Got it. Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Royston. Winston Lake Clubhouse. does this affect them, or is that going to remain the same? Or is it the persons that have the contract? How does that go out there as well? Because we do rent out the clubhouse for events as well.
It does. Winston Lake Golf Course Clubhouse was already included as part of the ordinance. None of the changes that are being proposed as part of the ordinance amendment will affect anything going on at Winston Lake Golf Course. There are a set of rules and guidelines that we follow at Winston Lake Golf Course, and we will continue to follow those.
Thank you. Any more questions? Can I get a motion? A second. It's been moved and approved. Item C1. And we will now move on to the general agenda. First item, please.
G1, ordinance amending chapters A and B of the Unified Development Ordinances to change the standards for outdoor lighting, UDO 286, proposed by Planning and Development Services. Recommended by Planning Board, this item was continued from the October Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee meeting.
We kicked this one around a while, haven't we? Let's go.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The purpose of this ordinance is to standardize lighting standards for new development, control light trespass on residential zoning and public right-of-way, reduce glare, and address lighting problems from recreation uses. At the October meeting, the committee asked staff to investigate two items related to this: the regulation of streetlights, and to investigate whether there are any planned updates for parks and recreation facilities lighting. In regards to street lighting, the UDO doesn't regulate development in the public right-of-way. Standards for street lights are articulated in a separate policy that's managed by the city DOT. And street lighting policy, if the council wanted to change it, could be revisited through the Public Works Committee. And in regards to recreation lighting, there's no plan to comprehensively update lighting at city parks and recreation facilities, and lighting's just being updated incrementally as budgets allow, as needed. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any comments or questions? Councilman Larson.
Just a matter of clarification. This does not apply to any residential home units lighting, anything outside of commercial development at this point.
It would apply to multifamily from quadruplex up through apartment buildings.
New development only.
New development.
New development only. And that existing lighting is basically all grandfathered. There's no requirement under this to change out any lighting.
Unless it's a complete redevelopment, but not it wouldn't
so
apply.
Incrementally. So, and this applies uniformly to new development as well as city projects, city parks, recreation, all of that. But currently, you're saying that the city has no immediate plans for complete retrofitting of its lighting.
That's correct.
That's correct. So there's no projected cost in this proposal to the city or to anybody at this point other than new developers, right? So one last question: if we have a residential unit that's being developed and they put in street lighting, part of our acceptance for that project, if it's a street that we would eventually be accepting as part of the urban grid, would we require them? Of course, part of the review would be to require them to use our street lighting standard for this project.
Yes, it would be the current city street lighting standard. This development ordinance wouldn't affect that. It's a separate street lighting policy.
So that would not, the street lighting policy would not apply to, anything we're talking about here does not apply to any street lighting developed in a new residential area.
On public streets.
Well, this would be a street until I guess we received it, right, as a city street. The developer may put in street lighting. That standard would have to be met by this new requirement, or not?
No, that's
Okay.
They would have to meet our
Correct.
street lighting policy, which is separate, and we can bring that to Public Works if there's interest in that. But there's in a lot of those developments, will choose to, as it's articulated in that policy, to go to a higher, more decorative street lighting, and they pay that difference.
I think the questions we had last time were the concern that somehow or another the city was getting preferential treatment, and we are not, that we'll be held to the same standards that any other developer would have at this point.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember McIntyre.
Mike, I'd asked this question previously, and I think I know the answer to it, but this brings us in line with most of the other communities that have these kinds of standards. So this is not going to be a shock. It does not put us at a disadvantage from a development standpoint.
No, most of our peer cities have the same ordinance. The only one who doesn't is Charlotte, and they're kind of on a case-by-case basis where they use these standards.
We don't want to be
They
like
use
Charlotte anyway.
S zoning, kind of like we do now.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'll move approval.
Second. It's been moved and approved. All those in favor, please vote. And it passes. In my eagerness to get finished with this agenda, I was remiss and I skipped over item on the consent agenda, C3. I'd like to go back to that. Is there anyone here that wants to speak on item C3?
161 Park Circle.
So am I still good because we
I
passed?
just
Okay.
wanted to ask if there was anyone.
Thank you, City Attorney, for letting me know. Next item, please.
G2, ordinance revising Chapter B of the Unified Development Ordinances to regulate residential fences and walls and front yards on properties with a residential building that is a single-family home, duplex, twin home, triplex, quadruplex, or townhouse, proposed by City Attorney staff.
Good afternoon. For your consideration today is the most current iteration of the ordinance regulating fences and walls in front yards on property with a residential building that is either a single-family home, duplex, twin home, triplex, quadruplex, or townhouse. I will briefly go over a few of the highlights. There have been a couple of changes to sort of streamline and simplify the ordinance. The first is just the fact that the ordinance now specifically references both fences and walls to make it abundantly clear that it's applicable to both. The second change, given that this ordinance came about from a desire to regulate the fences in the front yard, that is, a portion of the street frontage back to the front building line of the principal structure. So to that effect, the provision that governs the finished side facing outward will only be applicable to the front yard section of any of these residential fences. Moreover, the ordinance no longer contains the provision wherein the zoning officer could grant exemptions to the height limitations that are set forth in the proposed ordinance, given the subjectivity of such review that would fall upon staff. Moreover, the exemption that existed for masonry boundary walls now requires the totality of the wall to be built entirely of masonry, rather than this having a slight component of a masonry boundary wall with, for example, wood boards filled in. Finally, the amortization period for removal of these nonconforming fences is now 6 months. I'd also like to point out on behalf of the Planning Department that enforcement of this ordinance, should it be enacted, will be on a complaint-driven basis. There is no current inventory of fences, nor is there a plan to take an inventory of all the fences to determine which ones are non-conforming. And finally, I also wanted to note that there are no new permitting requirements that are being imposed as a result of this ordinance, aside from what is currently required by the state building code. I'm available for any questions, should you have any.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee?
This is essentially a proposal that, once if it is approved by the committee, goes to the planning board consideration, or does it come before the full council for review before you start the formal process?
Here's what I plan on doing. I know there was some desire to get public input, so we thought maybe we'd send it out for public input, and we can bring it back. We'll go ahead and take it to planning board after the public input, but it would go through the normal process for planning board and then come back.
Yeah,
Unless you all want something different.
No, basically, I was just wanting to confirm before I made a stupid mistake, thinking that this had not yet gone through the formal process.
They have.
All right.
Yes, Councilmember McIntyre.
I'll be real interested to hear what the public has to say about the 6-month amortization period. That seems quick to me. And I feel like it could potentially put the city in a position of a neighbor-on-neighbor dispute, where we're doing the demolition, and we're not going to be the good guys in that situation. So I'd be interested to hear what the public comment is on that.
You
And
all can make it longer. We just chose 6 months since it's now applicable only to the front yard. But if you still want to do or can do it, it's up to you.
And then just a question, what was the thought process behind the front-facing language in this? The good side of the fence has to face out? What's the purpose behind that?
Councilmember Larson.
Yeah, that was my request, and it's based on a historical precedent of how fences are built, at least in the 18th and 19th century that I'm aware of, that the post and the rails and the support mechanisms, the good side of the fence is either the neighbor's side or the public side. And because we're really concerned about the aesthetics of this as it appears from the public street, that would be the best side of the fence.
Seems very subjective.
It is. It's a historical matter of aesthetics and design, and how when you begin to impact neighbors' lots by constructing something, whether you are creating a less than attractive view of the lot by the way you construct your fence. That's what it's based on, and that's what I've observed historically, and that's why it's there.
Councilmember Best.
One more question. Remind us where this came from. Where did the idea come from?
I'll speak to that. It came from Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Burke, from some properties in her ward that had the fortress-type look with the fence all the way around the front, sides, and the back.
Very high.
8, 9, 10 feet high. Really couldn't see. So it's to kind of get rid of that particular fortress look, at least on the front.
Okay, but it's a lot more comprehensive than that at this point.
Initially, it evolved into something more comprehensive, but now it's more limited just to the front portion. But we did put in the finished versus the unfinished side on the front portion.
Okay. Well, I'll wait.
I know we've been back and forth on this, and we still have to hear from the public, but so if I'm driving down Robin Hood Road and I see this 6-foot fence in front of somebody's yard, I can just call that in, and it's got to be taken down? Or if it's faced the wrong way, it's got to be taken down?
If it's more than 50% opaque, not out of masonry.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I talked with the Mayor Pro Tem before I came in this evening, and she is very much supportive of this, and I am as well. When it comes to, again, this is morphed into some other things, but the thing with us in the urban core communities is we have people that are building fortresses in our community, and hence we don't know what's going on behind those 10 feet high fences. You can't see through them. You know something's going on. It's around the whole property line. I don't think it's a good thing safety-wise for the community or our public safety officials to have to answer those types of calls there. And again, we don't know what's back there. Nobody knows. And I think that when you have a person that in the middle of residential, they build a 10-foot high wooden, mason, wrought iron, whatever, all kinds of fencing. It is like a fortress, and it doesn't give the community a good look. And I don't think, again, we're doing anything any different than we looked at other cities in trying to prevent this type of building going on in our communities. Again, it doesn't affect Renolda Road and, you know, other areas of the city like it does our communities. But again, that's where we were going with this, that people that want to continue to do chop shops in the back of their houses and other types of activities, we need to be able to stop it. We can't inspect every house, but we need to be able to know what's going on, so our inspectors, if they're called, they can see. Yes, Councilmember Lawrence.
I do have a couple of questions, and this is a difficult topic because I think we can all look at different parts of the city and think of individual problem areas where we have these fortress fences or walls even within a compound of condominium houses, for example. And I do think there's going to be some serious discussions. I think the 6 months is going to be a very difficult thing for us to deal with, and I would agree that we ought to look at a longer period of amortization on this, but give the public some warning time. Can you explain to me the 1070 rule or whatever, sightline rule, what that actually means? Somebody give me the geometry of all of this. And the reason I'm asking that in part is because I know we have some locations that we have houses on the ends of blocks, so the front of the house is facing one street and the back of the house is on another street. The lot goes all the way through from block to block, and we could have, with the way this is written, you know, we can have a large board fence in the back of the lot legally, but have a 4-foot high fence on the front side and on the sides, and yet, so I'm trying to understand what this sight line requirement is, which I assume applies to all sides of the fences in any direction.
It isn't anything that that we typically enforce in our shop. It's generally handled at the public works side and engineering side whenever driveway permits or streets are constructed. But essentially, whenever you pull up to a street intersection, when you come to where the property line begins and where that pin is, you measure a distance back 10 feet. And then you go along the frontage of that property 70 feet and then draw that triangle. That area right there is the 10 by 70 site triangle easement where you can't have any obstruction over a certain height so that you can be able to see in both directions looking down the street.
So I'm 10 feet back from the intersection and I can look 70 feet down the opposite direction.
Right.
Or
It's
the 90-degree angle.
It's all for traffic safety.
Correct.
At the intersection. So it's two streets, basically. Pulling back 10 feet and being able to see clear 70 feet into the right or whatever.
Right, and of course you could have a fence in that you could see through.
Right.
You could have no fence. You could have a fence up to a certain height as long as as you're sitting in your vehicle you can see over it. But it's those kind of things where it's on a case by case basis whether or not it would interfere with that sight distance.
And that's universal. That's not just when this is, or is this only going to, so 70.
This right here, this is already a requirement in the ordinance. It's already a requirement for streets. It's already a requirement for constructing a building. It's a requirement for a sign. It's just this was put in here to make it clear that this also applies to fences.
I can think of two examples right off the bat, but we're not currently enforcing that. I mean, board walls on the corners of lots that go more than 70 feet and more than 10 feet in either direction. I'm just trying to understand what we're going to ask here for this. So if you're on a corner lot and you have a high board fence, chances are you're going to have to drop that fence down.
The corner of Broad and Salem Avenue.
Corner of Broad and Salem Avenue is one.
That's
Poplar and Weston Poplar.
Yeah, I mean those something like that right there would have to. I mean, essentially it's already not in compliance. But
Right.
And one of the things, again, as Councilmember Bessie and we just said, this is going to go through the process. And we're going to go through that. We're going to have public hearing. We're going to get public input. And the amount of time needed to do this, as the city attorney said, it could end up being 12 months. It could end up being 24 months. But, I'm sure we'll listen to the public. But, again, this is to get it going.
Yeah, I applaud. I applaud.
This is one of these things, too, just like the tree ordinance and the sign ordinance and parking ordinance. This is one of those that we spend a lot of time, and thanks staff, all of you, and all of you. But this may end up cut and sliced by the time it goes through the public hearing, and we as council members may have to succumb to the will of the people.
Okay.
But always think, just like he was saying, the sight line, safety takes a precedence over everything.
Exactly. Thank you.
Councilmember Best.
Without any conclusion about what I would support when it comes time to enactment, I'll move to kick it forward. Public comment.
I'll second it. All those in favor, please vote. It has been moved and approved. Thank you. Next item. Thank you, everybody.
G3, resolution approving revised boundaries for the neighborhood revitalization strategy area and authorizing submission to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
All right, Ms.
evening.
Newman.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman, Councilmember Bessie, and other council members. So come before you this evening with a proposed revision to the boundaries of our neighborhood revitalization strategy area for two reasons. One, our current map is at least 10 years old, so doesn't fully reflect the needs of the community as they've grown over the years. And then secondly, this past April, HUD performed a monitoring audit of our programs and opined that our strategy area was too large to achieve any significant scale or impact, and guided us to the point of needing to shrink the strategy area so that we would gain more targeted impact. So one of the things that we did in following HUD's guidance was try to look at how that impact might be achieved. So we did a few calculations, one looking at the ratio of low to moderate income citizens in the various census block groups. And what you see here in the orange area is what is proposed, juxtaposed against the current area, which is in blue. That area in the lighter orange is comprised of 61% or more residents who are low to moderate income. You do see a couple of darker orange areas on that map, and those areas we were working with our Business Inclusion and Advancement Office and also Assistant City Manager Evan Raleigh, and looking at how we might use the CDBG dollars to support small businesses. The income of residents in those areas would be too high to qualify for any of our loan and grant products, but we would have small businesses who could be eligible. And so those two areas were not included in the original NRSA because of the incomes, but again, with the availability of support for small businesses that could be used in those areas. There were some other areas of particular interest and concern to some council members. Some have been included in the existing NRSA, some were never. Going back to look again at income for those areas, they were over income. And in order for us to actually shrink that footprint to meet HUD's guidance and make sure we're targeting at that 61% or higher, we weren't able to accommodate those requests. There's one area, for instance, to the, I guess it's the east, that's that big blue swatch, for instance. There was a shopping center that was recommended to be included that was just right inside that blue area. Unfortunately, based on the census block group, we would have had to take in almost that entire swatch again, which would have kind of worked against what HUD had told us we needed to do. So as it stands before you, all of the orange is what would be the new proposed area. And I'll give you another map that just kind of shows it all intact. And I will say that, too, one of the things that we were interested in also was making sure that key neighborhoods that we knew we were making investments in and needed additional investments, we were making sure that those key neighborhoods were in there. So that first map that I had up for you actually had number of neighborhoods listed so you could see what was included. But that is what the final map would look like that we would submit to HUD if you were to approve. And I'll be happy to answer any additional questions.
Ms. Newman, I think it's good for you to point out again that this is not a plan that we just figure it out and do it the way we want to, that we're operating under the guidelines of HUD and the United States federal government. So would you talk to that again, that we were told we had to go redo this and do it based on the data of the census, which again tracks of the federal government?
Yes, that's correct. So where those dollars from HUD are targeted to those residents who are 80% and below area median income, certainly, again, we have folks who meet that income criteria across the city, but where HUD's desire is to target investment so that you can see impact and really start to change the face of our communities. We have to use a multifaceted approach. Our dollars from HUD are one aspect of that we can also combine with our bond dollars and other dollars to achieve that scale and that impact. But it starts with trying to have a smaller footprint where you can really invest those dollars and start to see them working in tandem with each other. Previous to this, we were investing dollars, but it was really hard to see where our money went. And so, in wanting to make sure we stay in the good graces of HUD when they guide us to do certain things, we listen and we try to follow that.
Thank you. Any questions, Councilman McIntosh?
Just a quick one. So these are steps to make us hopefully more eligible for more federal dollars.
Well, our eligibility is just based on our population and the rate of low to moderate income folks in our community in general. So it's not like it necessarily increases the pool of money, because that's allocated by a formula that comes through Congress and the like.
We're responding to nudging by.
They want to be able to see their dollars spent better than what they're able to see. I mean, when they came for the monitoring visit in April, we were able to drive them to multifamily developments, but when it came to single family and seeing where those dollars went, for instance, that's one example, it was a little bit more difficult between new construction and the rehab work. It was just scattered so broadly, it was hard to see. So we had to focus on multifamily projects to let them see where their development dollars were invested.
And if anyone wants to make this bigger or include more neighborhoods, let's say, again, it all goes back to the census. The census of 10 is driving this, and the census of 20 would drive it again. So again, and I'll be talking to the city manager and others about this, to National League of Cities. There were several workshops on the importance of making sure your city is ready with a committee to work with all of the other groups in the community and the government to ensure that all your citizens are counted. So this goes back to, again, people not taking the census seriously, and that it does determine how money from the federal level, resources and services come to local municipalities.
Correct.
Any other comments, questions? Councilman Larson.
A couple quick questions. How much money are we talking about? Best guess, really.
Well, for instance, our current year allocation for CDBG was about $2.1 million.
$2.1 million to reallocated within the area of blue, basically, really limited that area. Does this affect the TURN program?
It could. Right now, our TURN program is aligned with the NRSA boundaries, but we are currently working on a series of recommendations on how we might be able to reconfigure some of the guidelines and other elements of the TURN program so that we can gain more impact with that as well. So it may not track the NRSA, especially now that it's shrunk.
Yeah.
We hope that it shrinks.
That would be a concern of mine, that
absolutely.
we have pockets, we have other areas that I would hate to totally limit all options for any home improvements
and we
outside of the blue.
No, and we don't have to. That's the beauty of it being local money.
Right.
We can design that any way that fits our needs.
Local bond money that we just got approved.
Yes, sir.
Will have some flexibility in it. Lastly, this boundaries, how frequently can we anticipate them to be redrawn? Is this something we do every 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, every census? What do we do? When would I anticipate, if I'm still on council in a year or so, are we going to see another one? Or is this pretty well set until we get another census?
They can change. Obviously, the census will have a major impact. So if we see a significant shift from the census on where it's showing our low to moderate income residents a predominant number, because right now with what we're proposing, it's about 61% and higher in terms of the level of low and moderate income. So any significant shift that we see in that population, and also one of the other requirements is that your NRSA areas have to all be contiguous. So
Sure.
see an increase and it's all contiguous, those then help drive what those boundaries are. I would surmise that if, as a result of the census, we would need to make a shift, then it would be some years, another probably 8 to 10 years, before we would have to look at another shift. This particular NRSA that we have is a good, at least 8 to 10 years old.
Yeah.
So this is not something that we do every few years.
Right. Yeah, I can certainly see the value in concentrating the effort in certain areas. The boundary lines that we're seeing on this particular map and the ones I was looking at were a little vague. How hard, I mean, do we have like a 500-foot range? Is this a solid line, or are we going by streets? Or
It's census tract.
Census
it's
tract.
census
So
tract.
it's a hard line.
It's a hard line.
It's a hard line.
Well, it's hard to see on these maps exactly what that hard line is.
Yeah, and that's part of the challenge when we were trying to overlay neighborhoods and then the census tracts, because we didn't want it to get a little fuzzy and confusing and with all of the different data points on the map, but it's driven by the census block groups and like.
One of the things, could you get the council the census tracts that have been included in this to them? Okay. And by ward, so they'll know where this is. Yes, Councilman
Just
Bessie.
a short question. Are we required to make the area contiguous?
That is a
Because
requirement.
I'm sure there are some pockets in other areas that are just as much in need as
And this, again, this is not just, again, everybody knows, this is not just us. This is a lot of everybody else. Other municipalities struggling with this right now. The concept of we want to do community economic development throughout our communities, but the federal government, like a business, and they had to change their model as well, saying if you concentrate on a contiguous area where the data tells you, which we rely on that this is an area that you can do work, and we're going to help you, but it's got to be where we can continue to see improvements and be able to monitor it and document it, and that's what this is all about as well. We talked about it, some of us again out in the league. It is what it is. The government is also changing their model as funding becomes a problem, just like we do ours every day. But we kind of knew this one was coming because our map, unlike some other cities in North Carolina, ours was pretty big compared to other cities. We were trying to make sure we were inclusive, and we did, but the government is telling us now you have to do better. Yes, Councilmember Larson.
We're not required to match this money, are we? This is just coming, so it's a pot of money designated for a specific area of greatest need as defined by the federal government, and that's great. My only concern was that we do have other areas, pockets, as Councilmember Bessie would comment, that I hope we have programs and money available to help those as well. They're a little less cohesive maybe, but equally needed. So that's my only consideration.
And my concern, Councilmember Larson, is just because they get some money from the government, what, a couple of million or whatever it is, that there are still communities in this block right here. The data tells us this is one of the lowest income areas in our city. That's like a black eye on the city. And therefore, just like what we did downtown, just like we're doing in other areas, we're going to have to put more money in this area if we want to see income disparity, unemployment, food deserts, crime, and everything else that we have going on in that area right there. So I don't want people to, I mean, you can, but I'm going to be one of those people championing to make sure that area gets anything coming across the table that they are considered, because I won't have to do it. Our constituents and the citizens will come, because they're they're more engaged right now than I've seen folks in a while in this city. They are quite aware of everything that we do now, and when it affects their neighborhoods and their quality of life. So I anticipate there's going to be groups coming down here about that blue area right there in the future. Any other concerns, questions? Second. It's been moved and properly seconded and approved. Thank you. Next item. City Attorney.
G4, consideration of resolution adopting the City of Winston-Salem's legislative priorities for the 2019 legislative session.
Passed out a bill that did not make the system. It's the bill on filling vacancies. It's number 5, so I'll talk about it when we get to it.
Okay.
So the package is just for information this month. We'll come back in December for committees, and then hopefully be approved at the first meeting in January of the City Council. And then I anticipate we'll have a meeting with the delegation either the second or third week in January before they go in session. So that's sort of the game plan. But in terms of what's in the package, I'll talk about each of the bills. The conveyance bill is the first bill. As you know, the city has about 300 residential lots, 300 properties that it owns. And the purpose of the conveyance bill, which is actually part of the short session package as well, is to give the city council flexibility in selling these properties for affordable housing purposes. It allows you to sell them for $1 or whatever you think is appropriate to encourage affordable housing. This bill currently sits in the Senate Rules Committee. It passed House, went over to the Senate side, and ended up in the Senate Rules Committee before, which is chaired by Senator Raven. I'm supposed to have a meeting next Tuesday, I believe, with Senator Raven. So if it doesn't make it out of the Senate, then it'll be on the long session. And it's a good bill. It just got sideways because apparently some folks didn't quite understand what it was trying to do.
I remember.
Domain and it has
I remember.
domain. So, but that's the purpose, to give council flexibility and selling these city-owned lots for affordable housing.
Great.
The second and the third bill deal with sweepstakes. You may recall that I've been working with the city attorney in Greensboro, who's no longer there, and Representative Fairclough on sweepstakes. Given that the city attorney in Greensboro is no longer there, it's kind of awkward for me to kind of work with delegation, a person who's not a member of our delegation. So what I decided to do was to take the 2 bills that Greensboro and I had put together and given to Representative Fairclough to put them as a part of our package, so our delegation members can champion these bills for us as well. I think and will confirm that Representative Fairclough is still in favor of them, but it's just kind of awkward for me to deal with him when I don't quite know the city attorney, the interim city attorney for Greensboro. In fact, I'm not even sure what the legislative package is going to look like right now because it's kind of in a flux right now. So basically what the first bill does, there's this argument that these internet sweepstakes that are skill or dexterity based are not prohibited by law. My office, of course, thinks that they are. And so to eliminate that argument, we put it in black and white that they are. That's what the first bill does. And to the extent there's still an argument that some of these devices are still lawful, the second bill will limit the number to 4 per location, which will hopefully minimize some of the things that we're seeing at some of these locations in terms of robberies, crime, and things like that. So hopefully we'll make it clear that certain machines are prohibited, and then if they are still lawful, then we'll limit the number. So that's essentially what the 2 bills we're going to see.
Can I ask you a question about those 2 and whether this fits in at all? But I've heard commentary about the fact that they're all cash businesses and they're sitting ducks or they're easy targets. Is there anything afoot to change that?
Well, it's my opinion, and the opinion of a number of attorneys, that by the mere fact that they pay out cash, they're prohibited. So again, the idea behind this is to clear that up. I mean, you should be paying out, you know, something of value of $10 or less to really fit the exemption in the statute. So, I mean, we can try to clear that up, and that's what the bill will do. I don't know.
That was just an argument that I heard from somebody who was pro, and I thought I'd get some clarification.
Pro,
Sweepstakes operations.
so they want to see them continue in their present form then?
Yeah, they were saying that, you know, one of the reasons that to legalize them, you know, is that is to get rid of the cash thing, but, you know,
I don't necessarily see how they get through the cash.
I know.
But anyway, but I will say this. It will probably be a challenge to get either one of these passed. What I've been told is more likely than not to happen is that they will, quote, legalize them and tax regulate.
Okay.
Is that really going to take care of the issue that we're seeing, which is that they tend to be hotbeds for robberies and things like that? I don't know, but if they do legalize them, then I would say that maybe we can set some hours. We can do some reasonable regulations on them in terms of hours and things like that. I mean, it's unfortunate, but they seem to be the places that are open at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning with a lot of money, and so they're the target of robbery.
Is there any way, or your colleagues across the state, school of government, someone may have some data or information that has been compiled, or somehow we can get it with other public safety facilities, the crime, the numbers of crime, just like we can tell people, unfortunately, how many gunshot victims there's been? Can we find out and compile that data for crime at these sweepstakes places across the state? Again, what we see is most of these places are located in our communities, African American poor communities, and there may be something that we can do to prove that this is also discrimination and harassment to our quality of life. So again, I would like to see, I don't know what you can do, but if you can put the call out to see if we can capture that data, just like Moms Demand Action and others, that we can prove that this is a menace to society in our communities, and there really should be eminent domains that we can move on. Okay?
I'll be happy to do that. I know we are compiling that data and keeping track of it for the city of Winston-Salem. I think Greensboro is doing the same thing, but I can certainly
Thank you.
see if we can encourage other municipalities to do the same thing. But I suspect they are, because they're open again all night long, have a lot of money on hand. They tend to be hotbeds for robbers. I suspect we're not unique in that at all.
Thank you.
I'm happy to do that.
I'll just, if I may, I just want to comment for the record, these are a public safety nuisance. They're nothing but a device for sucking money out of the pockets of poor people and transferring it to the out-of-state software companies. The only reason they're not run out of town on a rail is because they give a lot of money to the campaigns of certain legislators.
Yeah.
And it needs to stop.
The next bill is the simultaneous communications bill, which is the remote participation bill, which allows council members to participate in council meetings remotely. It's the same bill you've seen before in the past, and I thought this might be a good time to try to run it again.
Thank you.
And then the next one after that should be the filling vacancy bill. And what I did was to take the two bills that were approved last month and combine them into one bill. So you have the election process, which is section 1, that allows for a general election and primary, and there's a vacancy on the city council. Allows the council to call for that process to be initiated. And then in section 2, you have for the 2-year time period for any vacancy that has been filled by appointment by city council for the citizens of that ward to petition for an election process. I can put it in 2 separate bills if you want to see it as 2 separate bills like they were last month, or I can leave it as one. And I put it basically in the package because I think it's probably optimistic, too optimistic, not realistic that it's going to pass It's in Raleigh. It's been given to the delegation members. I know Representative Montgomery is speaking with his colleagues in Raleigh about it, but given the fact they're convening next week and I think for a limited purpose, I really don't think this is going to happen in a short session. So that's why I put it in the long session package. You all tell me whether or not you want 2 bills or one.
What do you recommend? Should we separate them?
It's up to you all. I suspect the first one is probably a lot more palatable.
That's what I thought.
To our delegation members, and the second case, I can put it as 2, just whatever you all want to do.
I said I'm for separating them because we need section 1.
Okay.
Yes, Councilmember
Section-
Lawson.
Section 2 is going to be obsolete 2 years anyway. If they don't get this to the long session, I would hate to encumber a
This,
single
all
bill
of it.
and put it in one, and then for some reason, because of Section 2, the whole thing goes down. So I think we give them a chance to refuse Section 2.
And give us section 1.
Go with Section 1 as our main, because that's the thing that's going to endure.
Yeah,
Right.
And that's what we really want.
thank you.
Okay. I'll separate it.
All right.
The next one is the law enforcement bill. You may recall a couple of years ago when the General Assembly changed the law enforcement reporting bill such that the city no longer had the ability to allow for release of the body-worn camera footage, that now the city has to go to court and get a court order to release it. So council proposed a bill essentially a couple of years ago that would allow council, the city of Winston-Salem, to be sort of like a test case where the city again would make that decision with respect to releasing the body-worn camera footage. Well, when we put that bill before members of the General Assembly, it just didn't get any traction at all. And so what I ended up doing was having some meetings with Representative Faircloth, who was one of the sponsors of the bill that changed the process to begin with. And so we talked and talked. We've been talking for about a year and a half, and got to the point that he was willing to consider, along with his co-sponsors, some amendments to the bill that they had introduced in the past that would allow access to the body-worn camera footage by the city manager, by the CPRB, by city council, after confidentiality statements have been signed in the closed session. Again, I was dealing with Representative Faircloth and the city attorney in Greensboro on the particular bill that you have before you, because the city attorney in Greensboro is no longer there, and I don't know what's going on with the legislative package. I thought maybe if you all want to, you can go ahead and put it in your package. I'm thinking Representative Faircloth is still supportive of it, but I just don't want it to die because the person in Greensboro is no longer there. Now, if you all don't want it in its present form, just let me know, but that's kind of where we were in our discussions with Representative Faircloth and the city attorney in Greensboro in terms of reaching a consensus about some tweaks to the bill that right now requires us to literally go to court to get permission to even show the video to you all. I don't think we're ever going to get, not with the present folks in Raleigh, them to reverse the bill altogether and allow everybody to basically make a decision on as to whether or not we release it. I don't think right now, given the folks involved, that's going to change. I do think, based on my conversation with Representative Faircloth, we might be able to make some dent in that process to allow certain entities like the council and the CPRB access and closed session. Just let me know if you want it in the package or not.
Well, for me, I think put it in, because right now, every time there's an incident involving body cam across the country, particularly in North Carolina, we all go through the same process. But the process won't change if we don't keep trying to change it. And it's not necessarily us, it's what our citizens want. So I think it's remiss of us to keep trying in any form or fashion. Councilmember McIntosh? Yes, sir.
I'm with it. Transparency,
Yeah.
it's all about our attempt to have honest presentation. If we can't go totally public with it, I think council can act as a buffer of sorts to look at these. And I think we have to keep asking. I don't think the question goes away.
Right.
leave it in. They can say no again, but
Yeah, we keep trying.
Okay.
and there
Councilman Clark?
is, you know, at least there's one change in the delegation that's going to be more favorable.
Certainly.
Any comments, Councilman
No.
Clark? Okay. All right, next.
Let's see, the next two bills, maybe wishful thinking, but anyway. Recognizing, I guess, for the last couple of years, the shortage in revenues that the city has experienced and the efforts by the General Assembly to take away options for increasing those revenues, I thought it was about time to revisit a promise that was made when they took away the purpose license. You may recall in 2015, when we went down to Raleigh and complained about the fact that they were taking away the purpose license, that they were taking away, at least for the city of Winston-Salem, $3 million. That's after having taken away the custom software tax and the whole karma, so we lost about $6 million. And so in 2015, there was a promise made, well, we'll try to find some replacement revenues for you. Well, I mean, I really haven't seen them, so I thought maybe now's the time to revisit that. And again, it may be kind of optimistic, but I put in a bill to allow for a quarter-cent sales tax, and that money would be used for economic development, affordable housing, and so forth. It would be subject to referendum, but I thought at least it's worthwhile. And I also put in a local purpose license tax, and based upon the calculation that's in there, it's about $1 million. We thought for the other bill, the quarter-cent sales tax, about $3 million. Just in talking to the league and some folks in our delegation, quarter-cent sales tax may have get more traction than purchase license. Because right now, every time you say purchase license, I think about folks in Raleigh. But we'll ask if you all want to.
Councilman Clark.
Has there been any talk, and I would maybe address this to the League of Cities folks, or about bringing back the privilege license, because based on the last election, a quarter-cent sales tax would be difficult.
Yeah. They haven't really talked about it much because I guess there's still this sour taste in the mouths of folks in Raleigh behind the fact that Charlotte charged such an exorbitant amount. I think they were collecting like $21 million. It was some amount.
And I will say, I think the example I was heard was in this town, Walmart, which is probably one of our largest retail boxes. It was what, 4,000 or 5,000, and in Charlotte was 30,000 or something. It's just some huge difference. But I could certainly see maybe more of a uniform privilege license
and that's
across state.
And if they use this model that's in here, I think it would be more reasonable. Like I said, we lost about $3 million when they repealed the purchase license tax, and this would bring about $1 million. I mean, to me, it's a reasonable calculation. I think if they apply something like this across the state, you know, I think it would take care of a lot of the concerns that were expressed about the previous cities charging so much. But I've been told that word is a very good. So I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't mind asking.
And we may have to wait longer for that the negativism of that word to go away.
Right.
And maybe we just talk about that informally when we're with our delegation, January, February.
I weren't here. The plan is to bring this package back in December and then have you all approve it at your first meeting in January, and then the second and third in January.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, you all let me know if you want both of them to stay in there. Like I said, the challenge might be
Stay. Stay.
And
Councilman Best.
yeah, the quarter-cent sales tax, I haven't actually done a precinct by precinct check, but I wouldn't be surprised if it actually passed in the city and went down. And have you checked the numbers?
Yeah, there were only 2 precincts that were that color red on. I think they were blue and everything else on the map was red. Whatever it was, there was 2 little. I'm assuming those were precincts in the whole county that were the color that approved it.
Okay.
Now I didn't look at it at 1 in the morning. This was maybe 10 at night, but
no,
it went down. I think my wife and I are the only 2 people in the city that voted for it.
Oh, please.
I stand corrected. I do wonder to what degree the subject that the commissioners chose to seek the tax for was instrumental in going down. I don't think people were excited about paying extra sales tax to build a new courthouse.
Yeah, and that.
And the attempt to sell it during the campaign as a education,
Bond.
it's too little too late.
No.
But anyway, yeah. I mean, and they can always vote it down.
I was just going to, Chairman said that if we had that tool, I think staff would recommend a long citizen process to build support for what the money was for, with a lot of engagement, so that I mean, the county didn't do a lot of that. They kind of threw it out there.
No, they didn't. And that was the difference in ours passing and theirs not.
Right.
We started talking about the bond right after 14.
Right.
In 16, we started ramping up to have another bond. In 18, we put it out there. Our citizens were like, okay, the process that we used in 14 is what helped us to be successful and also helped us to be successful in 18. I would have thought that they would have took a page from us, and, you know.
They started very late.
They started very late.
Yeah, the more transparent you are about what you're going to spend the money for, the greater the chances are. If it's something the public supports, you know, if it's not something they're interested in.
And that's what we said in 14, that we would put out there, give them a chance to tell us what you want, because we not the experts on what everybody wants, and I think that got us a lot of support behind it too, because if there was a pocket park needed over here, and somebody else wanted some economic development over here, the people drove the plan, so that's why it was so successful. Any other comments, City Attorney? We got anything left to go? The general?
Just two resolutions quickly. Generated resolution, there was interest by Mayor Pro Tem Burke, I guess because during the two hurricanes, Michael and Florence, citizens experienced, in particular senior citizens, the unavailability of doctor's offices being open during those weather events. And so she wants to explore the possibility of requiring generators in doctor's offices. And so I put together a resolution that simply asked the General Assembly to have a legislative committee to study that, see what kind of impact that would have, and if it's something worth pursuing, to maybe look at some incentives to give to doctor's offices to install generators so that they can provide the medical services that are needed during these events. So that's that resolution.
Okay.
And then the last one, again, is to deal with the whole issue of not having enough revenue options for generating revenue. So neither one of the ones that are proposed or tell us what will, give us something. So that's what that is. And the league is doing the same thing. I mean, they realize, and you all will see next week during the advocacy meeting, they realize that a lot of cities need revenue options.
Absolutely.
We're not all Raleigh, we're not all Charlotte, where our tax base is small. And so they're trying to put together some options and things to consider in terms of generating revenue.
Okay. All right. Any comments? Councilman Bessie.
Back to the specific legislation. I am not a fan of local electronic meetings. I understand that they're a necessary, I don't want to say evil, but they're a necessary less than desirable option when you're talking about a national committee, something that requires travel. But I've done enough of them that I know how degraded the level of discussion and debate is in an electronic meeting compared to an in-person meeting. And to sort of open-ended, you can use them without significant limitations on the local level would encourage people to use them for convenience. When it was trouble to get downtown or something, and if I'm the only person on the council that feels that way, I don't want to use a lot of discussion time on it. But I'd be interested to know what the majority opinion is on the council.
And I can solicit the way it's drafted, you all come up with your rules and regulations.
Yeah.
You have certain things that you have to include as part of the rules and regulations that you don't do. In terms of how frequently, under what circumstances you use it.
How many people could use it if you want to limit the number?
Yeah. I am, I'm in support of it. You know, I've been saying it for years, particularly when you're talking about if younger or other people run for office and they have families and they have businesses and they have working schedules, it shouldn't be that I couldn't do a meeting, a council meeting or committee meeting if I'm in management or whatever on my lunch time at work, my personal time, 2 hours or whatever. And I feel like we need to understand the world is changing, and that's what technology allows people to be more accessible and to participate. No different than the argument about the transportation yesterday. We've got to be able to want to be more inclusive, even when people are wanting to do this job, versus thinking that everybody can get off and be here when it is, or when you're sick. You know, even when you're sick, and I was sick, I couldn't come out of the house, but I would have loved to have been able to participate in the meeting, put a suit jacket on over my pajamas, and participate, you know? And we have people that travel because of their business, because of family, because of whatever. This is not something that people are locked to 24/7, and we can't do anything else. But that's why I tell people, you better understand what this is about when you run. There's more to this and the people doing it than just being here 24/7. So I support it because I was the one that brought it up years ago.
I'll just comment. I tend to agree with Mr. Bessie. U.S. Congress doesn't allow remote voting.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Councilmember Clark.
Yeah. Raleigh doesn't allow it. And I was late tonight, so I missed some. Now, this is just kidding. So
you could have been on your phone in your car.
Yeah. Well, I was doing other things too. Yeah, but I do. Of course, obviously, you do get something being in person, and I have meetings I miss. I have watched the replay, so to speak, But I think a commitment you make, and I see Miss Scipio sitting back there, she's getting ready to make this commitment, and you got to be here 4 times a month, and it means you always vacation in months with 5 Mondays, because you get a week off there. But I just think that comes with the territory, and I mean, I think there'll come a time when we vote remotely, but we can't even do that now. You can mail it in, or you can vote early or vote election day, but we don't have an app yet to vote. I think there's a reason for all this.
Councilman McIntosh.
I think I tend to draw the line too between emergency necessity. I would think that in the case of illness or how you define an emergency, it would be better to have the input than not. So I guess I'm kind of in the middle on it.
Councilman Lark.
I really like seeing you guys every couple weeks. I think that it's kind of nice for us to get together in person, press the flesh. I would agree with Councilmember McIntosh. I can see the occasion where somebody was hospitalized and was not able to physically be here. If we could Skype them in or actually have their picture, have them on a TV screen or something, and they could see us and we could see them. I am less enthusiastic about Councilmember Clark going to France and drinking wine and Skyping in at that point. But, I think if we were to approve a policy that we will argue out those sorts of things, whether we put this option on the table, I think is a question right now. And I'm inclined to say it's another tool in our chest. And whether or not how we exploit it is something we'll have to work out. So with that in mind, I think I would be willing to look at it, but I think when it comes forward, I'd be very constricted in how we actually allowed it to be used.
Thank you. City Attorney again. I was gone for like 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. I watched the meetings on the screen, but I would have liked to participate. This again is something we can craft to our liking. Maybe I don't get to vote, but at least I'm present and I abstain. I think there's something, we need to be, again, think about it, forward thinking. There are other cities already doing this. I just want us to think about it, that as some of us get older, there are going to be some things that you're not going to be able to be here because you may be incapacitated at your house. Not saying that you couldn't talk, you couldn't visual, but you can't come here. I think we need to be thinking about that. If there are people with young children and they have to be at the house, the other spouse or parent is working, but they have to be there to take care of the child, we have to be a little bit more forgiving and thinking and where we're going with this. If that's what I'm saying, yesterday we talked about the birds and how it's transportation mode for new people, younger people. I got that. But there are other pieces to us moving forward as a city to be inclusive, because everybody's life is not like ours as we see it now. Other people do other things, and I got a text from somebody telling us that saying the council doesn't think forward enough. We think like we're it. And so we just need to be more forward thinking and inclusive. So all I'm asking is, again, let's give it a shot, see where it goes. I vote.
We'll see.
When I'm voting with the league, I can vote when I was on the league. I'll not have to be there. All I'm saying is think about it. We can craft it any way we want, where you can't vote. I don't think
we've got to get it through the state legislature
correct
first. And the question, do we submit it? Yeah.
And I figured, like we said, you keep trying. Anything else, City Attorney?
That's it.
Councilmember Bessie.
I just saying, I would be happy to entertain an illness exemption, but I think while I hear the argument about being open to participation for folks who schedule your quite legitimate schedule, prevents them from being here in person. I don't think that's enough. I think that there is a qualitative difference between the in-person participation and remote participation, and the public can reasonably insist that you make arrangements to be here in person if your health permits you to do so. I would.
Or get a doctor's note.
For your mother.
But you all can craft it however you want to.
Thank you.
But that's pretty much the package for today. It's just for information. I'll bring it back in December if there are any other items to include.
Thank you.
Question on the quarter cent. Does that have a sunset on it if the legislature passes it, or is that an open-ended thing for us to, if it takes us 2 years, 3 years to implement based on?
This proposal is open-ended.
It's open-ended. Thank you.
Any more comments, questions?
I just got a quick question about heading down to Raleigh next week. Is staff, who's going? We're going to ban carpool?
We're working on transportation now. I think Damon's working on that.
Yeah. You're going.
Councilmember Scipio, Councilmember Byrd, Councilmember McIntosh. Now, Councilmember Adams, are you driving yourself?
I'm driving myself.
Okay. Councilmember Larson.
Yeah, I may
Next
have,
week?
may have to drive myself because I may be a
29.
little late getting there. I've got
I think you had indicated you weren't going to
FTC goes.
So just let us know, Councilmember Larson, if you're going to.
What time were you going to leave?
We typically leave between 6:30.
Yeah, too early.
6:30.
All right, we can take this offline.
In registration like 8.
Okay. Any more comments pertaining to the meeting? If not, this meeting is adjourned.